Okay, Dr. Kate, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. And what I would like to do to start is I would love for you to give us a little bit of a background on who you are and how the book came about. Step away.
Sure, absolutely. That sounds perfect. Yeah, and by the way, I'm happy to be here and thank you so much for the invitation. This is great. Um, so listen, I am a clinical psychologist and an author. I've been a psychologist for 20 plus years, and I am a podcast host. I'm a mom. I have 18-year-old twin boys. So
So
juggling
fun.
of the career and the mom thing has been real for me. Uh, and let's see, I'm a dog lover. One of my favorite things right now is working as part of the animal assisted therapy team over at Seattle Children's Hospital.
I love
And
that.
yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell. Beyond that, really active family life. I'm a fitness geek on the Peloton every morning
Mm.
and really need that to get my day started. Um, and I'd love to learn to cook and bake some really cool fresh breads at some point. But yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
me in a nutshell.
That whole sourdough thing is all the rage right now. And it makes me
Yeah.
think I'm missing out on something really fun. But it,
Well, I know it's the rage, and I've been hearing a lot about it. In fact, I met someone just the other day who has a hobby baking sourdough or making sourdough pizza. So it sounded
okay.
really, really cool.
Okay, that
And
might be something
so,
we can get into.
yeah.
Awesome. So
Yeah,
tell me about Step Away. How did you get started determining that that was the book that you wanted to write?
yeah, that's a great question. And really, the reality of it is parenting is hard. And so many of my clients are parents, really all of them actually at this point. I do a lot of work with sports parents and parents in general who are really stressed out and trying to optimize life within their own unique context so they can show up more robustly as parents, as people, and model these things for their kids. So that's the first thing. The second thing is my own experience as a parent. My boys were born, it was 18 years ago now, which is really, really hard to believe. And no sooner had they been born that my husband's job transferred him to another city. So the boys and I stayed back thinking, oh, it'd be short-term deal. We'll sell the house and we'll join my husband. And really hard to sell the house at that time. It was a crazy juggling act, right? And I recognized the importance of figuring out how to I was resilient at the foundation. I felt like I was
Mm-hmm.
resilient, but how to really foster that in myself as a new mom, as a professional, how to balance those two things, and would it be possible to do it all at once? Definitely not. I learned that lesson. But how to create that optimal balance for me, because there's no one size fits all. And so that experience over time, because obviously I'm still a parent, also kind of shaped the book and was a catalyst for me writing it.
I feel like
And
having
then
kids.
one more piece, one more
Okay.
lens that I touch on at the beginning of the book is my experience as a child. I had a serious medical condition when I was 4 called hydrocephalus, and caused a lot of in and out of the hospital, coming back to school, looking and feeling different, all these things. But it was a really difficult experience on many levels. And my parents had to show up as resilient and had to help me to focus on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do, and had to help me kind of to see possibility on the other side of the very real challenges. So I touch on that at the beginning of the book. So it's woven into the tapestry of the book. So it's really those three lenses is how the book came about.
What would you say was a defining moment for you? Was it having your boys and being alone? Was it, maybe when you were 4 and having these insurmountable feeling obstacle to overcome, or something else that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think defining moments come in different ways at different times. And I think that the primary defining moment or experience or set of experiences really does relate back to the diagnosis of hydrocephalus and how that really a very real challenge that had to be managed over time. And through that experience, learning to focus on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do, learning really, in a sense, to appreciate my own unique context. And I feel like that's a really important foundation for us all to have. Easier said than done. But I would say that that's the moment I would pick.
When you look back, obviously our upbringing is different than our kids. So our kids are being raised in a world where there's a pocket computer with them at all times, whether we like it or not. They're surrounded by information and access to people all the time. What are maybe one tip that you would give to parents who are navigating that world of social media? How can we be resilient in a place where our children don't have our attention 100% of the time?
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really hard because the pitfalls of social media are real, right? I mean, I live it here and I see it in myself. I mean, I want to be off of social media more than I am. So it's a very real thing. And so it's important to create moments where we can authentically connect with our kids without the phone as a distraction. So, just make it kind of a normal thing for you. That's what we do here. To phones don't come to the dinner table, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to capitalize on those moments where phones are somewhere else to create authentic human connection with our kids, not trying to swoop in with solutions to the challenges that are being had, but really hearing about the challenges, that sort of thing, and trying to go from there to build in other moments like that. But there are no easy answers. There's because the distractions of social media are very, very real.
When you mention resilient parenting, what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, great question. And so basically what I'm talking about, so oftentimes folks are thinking about resilience as kind of moving through a challenge as it comes up, a singular one, and then moving on. But really, what I'm talking about with resilient parenting is integrating tools and strategies into our own life and context that help us to function optimally, to optimize our own sense of well being, our own sense of possibility as parents and as people, which then helps us to show up for our kids more robustly, helps us to model what it looks like to move through and beyond challenge, to believe in possibility for our children, such that they start to integrate these ways of living into their own lives. And so, I'm looking at resilient parenting as sort of a lifestyle that we're creating over time.
You mentioned, responding instead of reacting to environments, or at least I read that somewhere when I was looking at Step Away. And that's something that we teach too, is like really looking at responding instead of reacting. Can you give an example of what responding to something would look like versus a reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we want to respond in a calm and measured way as best as possible. So, let's say that our kid breaks curfew and isn't answering their phone. And reacting to that situation would be, you know, talking, screaming, maybe in not screaming, but you know what I mean, reacting in a really angry, negative way when they come in the door. Um, very punitive response, as opposed to in a more measured way of, hey, what happened? This is really unlike you. Let's have a discussion. What's going on? That kind of a thing. So it's being able to create space and perspective for that to happen, also modulating our stress response because, we want to be starting from as level a space as possible, such that when something happens like that, that's going to perhaps escalate us a little bit, we don't want to be up here already so that we escalate to the point of shutdown. So that's a really important piece of it as well. And I teach folks a technique called the relaxation response to level out that foundation. Super simple technique. You're just breathing as you're thinking of a word or a phrase that you find soothing in some way. Practicing that consistently, super important. But you
Mm.
can also use it, keep it in your back pocket for when there's an issue like that with a child or something else happens. But you really want to make sure that you respond in those types of situations instead of react in a punitive, harsh, negative manner, which is just going to shut your kid down.
It sounds like too when your kid comes home, they break curfew, you're upset, you're angry, you're up later than you want to be, all the
Yeah.
things. And so walking in asking them questions shows that you're curious about what's going on as opposed to accusatory. Is that kind of where you're coming from too? Like let's not just accuse the kid of XYZ thing before we even know any answers because maybe there's a reason.
Exactly, precisely. We want to create open dialogue
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity for explanation. And yeah, maybe something happened. Maybe they had to, get a friend home or make sure that a friend was safe or, any myriad of things. And so really important to leave space for that kind of a discussion.
Pretty sure that I've violated this on numerous occasions. I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe my kids shouldn't watch this one. I'm just kidding. However, it's fine. My kids are both adults now. I'm learning all the things that I probably needed to go back and rewind and do differently. But at the same time, it's one of those things where there is no way to do parenting 100% correctly all the time. And so there's a little bit of grace that's necessary for us to be good parents. So, what do you recommend for people who feel like they're stuck in like mom guilt?
Right. Yeah. And you make a really good point. There's first of all, there's no one size fits all. And there's no way that we're going to show up the way that we want to each and every time.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to give ourselves grace and flexibility in all of that. And so that's one piece to kind of reinforce that reality, to help with this idea of mom guilt, because that's real, right? But to also, you know, take a step back and recognize what we've got within our own unique context and not compare ourselves to other people, because that can also really fuel our guilt as moms, thinking, well, we're not showing up enough, we're not doing it well enough, all of it. But really, we want to try to avoid that kind of comparison because really, we're doing the best we can within our own unique context. And really holding on to that notion is very important.
I have a lot of clients, teenagers, young adults. None of them have parents that are the same. Like all of the way that they parent is very differently. The way I parent is different. The way I parented each of my kids is different. They're 8 years apart in age. They had different needs. They're different in every single way. And so I
Mhm.
feel like it's difficult to measure whether or not I'm parenting accurately when I may just be parenting differently. And that doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
Exactly, 100%. And you raise a really good point because I have that too. I have twin boys, but they're very different
Mm-hmm.
and they require very different approaches and things, really, in terms of how we parent them and what they need to maximize their own unique potential within their own context. And so, yeah, that's a really great point. And then we're all different, right? Coming from different contexts and experiences and all of the things that are going to impact the lens which we look through as parents. So it's a really, really important point.
What do you recommend that parents do in order to strengthen themselves to be a better parents?
So to kind of strengthen their own sense of self within their own
Mm-hmm.
context so that they can show up as more robustly as parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, the managing of the stress response on a consistent basis is really important so that we're level and we're not always living up here, and then shutting down. But really to take stock, to be aware of the things that we need to be at our best. What are the things that are going to help us to optimize? For some folks, it might be exercise, it might be reading a book, or, taking time out to call a friend, or maybe for some, it's a hot cup of delicious coffee and a walk around the block. Hobbies are really powerful for folks. support, engaging with other people, whether it's friends or family, or maybe it's a, support group if you're struggling with a specific issue with your child, like maybe they have ADHD or a learning challenge that you find baffling on some level to manage effectively. So maybe connecting with others in a similar boat is going to be uh, helpful for you in some way. So it's putting together the pieces of what's available for you, what the pieces of the puzzle to help you to feel supported in a way that allows you to optimize both your own sense of well-being and also what you're able to bring to the mix as a parent.
I feel like if you're so overwhelmed, because I start thinking about myself as a parent or other parents that I know, they get so overwhelmed that they're spending so much time putting fires out that they don't sit back and reflect like you're talking about and say, oh, what do I need to be at my best? And you mentioned even in your opening, I exercise every day. I need that. I'm involved in these different activities. I have these likes and these dislikes. I have these things that I like to do that make me me. How often do moms especially like sit back and think, what do I need to be my best self? And so is it that simple, just sitting there going, what do I need to be at my best? And then making time for it?
Yeah, so that reflection piece is really, really important. And oftentimes, particularly for us as moms, we're moving through life at light speed
Mm-hmm.
because we have all these things to do, oftentimes putting out fires or taking care of, the needs that other people have, whether it's our kids or our spouses or our partners or our jobs or whatever. And so we can get lost in the shuffle. So it's finding a space, finding some quiet where we can reflect on, what do I need to be at my best, and how might it be possible to put those pieces into place? And it's going to look different for everybody, right? But it's that question of taking some quiet reflection time to think about it, and that will start the process moving forward of actually getting those things in place.
Do you feel like people need to give themselves permission to find the time?
You
Almost
know,
like almost like I don't know when I'm going to do this, but if you don't give yourself an opportunity and a need to do it, you're never going to do it.
exactly. If you don't intentionally create the time and the space, most likely it's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find in working with so many people in this way, when we intentionally create the time and the space and we put those things into place that allow us to optimize our well-being and otherwise, we actually have more time. But it's hard to see that at the outset.
I've started spending like 30 minutes in the morning just in quiet, like complete silence with just a journal and
Mhm.
maybe a Bible, but just kind of in silence and just waiting. Like what do I need to do? What do I feel? What comes to mind? And I found it to be incredibly freeing and
Yes.
almost like it starts my day off in a completely different tone. Is that something you
Mhm.
would recommend for? I mean, obviously everybody needs something different, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to look different for everybody, but I think that is a wonderful strategy because, you're in a quiet space. Your mind settles when you're in
Mm-hmm.
that space, right? It might take a little bit of time. Like maybe when you started, you'd see all
Oh
these
yeah.
thoughts coming in and all these distractions. But over time, and correct me if I'm wrong, have you noticed sort of your mind settling into that 30 minutes and you find yourself starting to look forward to it?
Yes, a little bit more and more. And sometimes I get distracted and don't do it. And when I don't do it, I like miss it. And then I'm like, oh, that was a missed opportunity. I could have been alone for 30 minutes. And so instead of
Yeah.
distracted by all of the things, like I'll take a phone call and instead I could have just not taken that phone call. As long as it wasn't an important call, I could have just waited. And so I feel like when I give myself that uninterrupted time, I gain so much more. And I like what you said where you feel like you have more time when you give a little bit back to you. It's almost
Yes,
like you gain
that's
more time.
exactly. You gain more time, and it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around when you haven't experienced it. But once you start to experience that and feel the time and feel the benefits of that, it becomes easier to intentionally make those choices that create space for yourself.
Is it because, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but when we're overwhelmed and frantic, we tend to maybe waste time doing things that are not quite necessary, but might feel important, but not necessarily as necessary. And then if we give back to ourselves and we give ourselves, we're coming from a completely different headspace.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's spot on, right? We're able to make decisions, make moves more intentionally in terms of how we're spending our time. And we don't feel the need to be caught up in the chaos of busy,
Mm-hmm.
because we can so easily, at least I can, get caught up in that chaos of busy where you're just kind of doing, creating, building, but maybe half that stuff or a quarter of that stuff wasn't totally necessary.
And then we're wasting time.
Exactly.
So
Precisely.
you mentioned that you work with a lot of sport parents, parents of competitors, and obviously that's an area in which I'm interested in. My dad's an Olympic champion. I work primarily with people who compete, whether that's in performance areas like pageantry or maybe dog sports or, gymnastics, figure skating, or whatever. And I ask everybody the same question: how do you define winning?
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? And I personally define winning as showing up at your best within your own unique context.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're giving your best within your own unique context, that's winning. And I truly believe that. I mean, I lived that as a kid because I was a competitive tennis player and I rarely won the match. I mean, I won matches, but I rarely won the tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
My best was, bested by one of my best friends who was just a better player than I was. But I still was out there playing to the best of my ability. And I can honestly say I loved it. And I think, that lens was largely shaped by my experiences with the hydrocephalus because, I knew what it was like to be on the sidelines, not able to play at all.
Mm.
And so I really was playing with a love of the game from the inside out, And so I learned that was sort of integrated early because of my experiences, right? Um, but I truly believe and I encourage everyone I work with to try to shift the lens. You don't have to have the gold medal or the first place trophy to have won. I really strongly believe that. I have fostered that mindset, that lens in my boys. I don't know if they always um, internalize it fully,
Right.
but that's how I define winning.
I think we're going for the win all the time, so much so that we miss the opportunity to learn the lessons along the way. And
Mhm.
I think that's part of what parenting's all about is making sure that your kids understand that you're not always going to win the competition, but you can win in life.
100%.
You can win the experience. You can have a lot of fun. You can grow, and all of that is worthwhile.
100%. Yes. And that's really embedded in, yeah, my vision of winning. Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me, how did you become a psychiatrist? Where did this dream to help people with their mind come from?
So psychologist,
Oh,
but
psychologist.
yes. Well, I really think it goes back to those early days. In the hospital, coming back to school, looking different, feeling different. My head was always like half shaved, I had these huge glasses. Um, and I think that was really the foundation that put me on this path, really wanting to understand people around me, understand how it's possible to get through challenges, which are really hard. And I obviously wasn't thinking about it in those terms when I was a kid, when I was 4, 5, 6, whatever. But I believe those early experiences shaped my interests in how I move forward in school. And then my aptitudes were better suited for the behavioral sciences than the hard sciences. Um, Math and science, like chemistry and physics and all that wasn't really in my wheelhouse per se, because there was a point where I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Mm.
Um, but you kind of ebb and flow, and I really, really got into the study of psychology in high school, later part of high school, college, and just always found myself gravitating towards like volunteer opportunities in at the hospital when I was in high school. In college, I did some research and some projects in that way. And so I think it evolved over time based on lots of things, but really, from those early experiences pointed me in the direction.
You mentioned earlier about therapy dogs and like working with your dogs like in the hospital setting. Can you talk to us about the science behind why working with an animal or having an animal in those type of experiences, those spaces is really beneficial?
Yes. Well, so that is one of my, I mean, it's my favorite. I just love my time in the hospital with Wally. Like going there with him is just, it just makes me happy. And I think one of the things that is so powerful is that animals are in the moment, you know? They're not showing up with any preconceived notions, any judgments, anything really. They're there and they're willing to give to others. And that's exactly what happens when I'm in the hospital with Wally. We go around and we visit the patients most of the time when we're there. Sometimes we're called in to do like a lunch and learn with a department. So we were just with the neurology team the other week. Um, but, he comes in unassuming, he plops down, he gives his paw to everyone. And it's just a cool thing to witness the smiles that come across the kids' faces. They maybe were struggling with something in the morning, or having a hard day, or they just had their blood drawn and they were really upset. And to see them be able to shift when Wally comes in and puts his paw on their bed and just looks at them, it's quite heartwarming. And then the moments where we're walking down the hall and a child might be struggling in their PT session, and the physical therapist asks us to stay at the other end of the hall and sit there. Well, Wally will sit there. And because the child really wants to pet Wally. So that becomes motivation
Oh, I love that.
to engage in the therapy. And it's really powerful when the child is able to shift into that space, walk down the hall, and pet Wally. It's very, very powerful. And I think just the fact that he shows up in this unassuming way, ready to give in all ways, is the thing that's so powerful.
And it probably doesn't hurt that he's super cute and fun to pet. I'm sure that doesn't hurt either.
He's very, very cute. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I want to know why you named the book Step Away.
Yeah, so it really is it comes back to this idea that as we step away to care for and optimize our own well-being as parents, we're better prepared to step in and
Mm.
to parent in a more robust and full way. So that's really why I named it Step Away. And we start the book by talking about the importance of managing our stress response as parents, and how stepping away is an integral part of that process. But really, it's a broader idea of, by stepping away in these ways, we're able to step in more fully.
Helicopter parents are probably not stepping away. Is that
Right.
true?
Yeah.
Or do you think there's a time when helicopter parenting is a good thing?
Well, it totally depends. I mean, I don't think full-blown helicopter parenting is necessarily great. No judgment, but
Mhm.
it can, as parents, we have a true drive to help in any way
Mhm.
possible, and to help our children move forward and succeed in various ways. Um, but giving them time and space to grapple with
Mhm.
challenges and issues on their own and problem solving and all of these things is really, really important. So the full blown kind of helicopter idea of just managing everything and being on top of everything is not necessarily going to benefit our kids in the long term, right? When they get to college or when they're out there
Mhm.
working and that whole thing. Um, so it depends, you know. I mean, maybe some people who are in that helicopter parent domain are taking time to care for themselves, and
Mm.
who knows? It's probably on an individual basis, but um, part of the kind of methodology, main premise of Step Away is to not do that, is to allow space for that problem solving, that grappling, which isn't always easy, you know? I mean, we don't want to see our children struggle.
So if someone
But
wants to purchase a copy of Step Away or reach out to you for more help, how do they find you and how do they find the book?
yeah, absolutely. So all of that is available on my website, www.katelundspeaks.com. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So that's another great way to find me.
Awesome. Okay, what is your last piece of advice for our listeners who they have kids, they're raising their kids, and they want to be more resilient?
So the big piece of advice would be to never lose sight of the possibility on the other side of the challenge, because it's there, I promise. And so don't lose sight of it for yourself or for your kids.
So there's always something worthwhile on the other side of an obstacle.
Yes, precisely.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Kate.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.